Hello, my name is Lindsay Peterson, and this is my video interview response. Um, to begin with the first question, one major conflict I experienced last year happened when my fifth grade colleague and I had to work together to cover the class of our grade level partner and team lead after she went on medical leave. We were responsible for providing lesson plans, grading, and coaching for our team lead's long-term sub. And this was from the middle of February all the way until the end of the school year. It was the busiest part of the year, so we had testing, track meet, field trips, fifth grade promotion ceremony, many things going on. So originally we had decided, my other colleague and I had decided to divide the lesson planning and grading, which was difficult on the sub because we just have very different teaching styles, me and my colleague do. And so she was kind of getting like very different things from each of us. And then typically my colleague wouldn't provide her lesson plans until the morning of like the day that they were due, that the sub was going to perform them, and the grades were not always entered correctly. Later I found out the reason for this was because my colleague was so overwhelmed, and she felt like she was expected to do a lot more work than was fair for her, which now I can understand that. So at the time, though, when I noticed things weren't getting done and they weren't exactly up to the standards that I had hoped for, it felt natural for me to just kind of take charge of the situation, and I offered to do all of the planning and grading and everything. So in my mind, I had offered her the choice and opportunity to contribute, and I was genuinely trying to make her life easier while still ensuring that the students got the education that they deserve. But my colleague interpreted this as me kind of taking over everything, and she felt like there was no space for her to contribute to the effort of supporting our colleague who was out on medical leave. And since I was only a third-year teacher at the time and she had 15 years of experience, she felt like I was disrespecting her and that I didn't appreciate her experience. I never really considered that she felt this way, and in my mind, I was helping her. I was helping the subs, and I was helping the students, and my intentions were never to make her feel underappreciated. It was purely to help. But what I saw and experienced from her was this growing negative attitude towards me, and sometimes it was passive aggressive, sometimes it was outright aggressive, and so the conflict grew, and it got more and more emotional. And what I realized is it really boiled down to a misalignment of perspective. So I perceived that she was upset because I was trying to plan and ensure the best for our students. And sometimes that did result in extra work on her part, just in the sense of, I wanted our field trip to be well planned with lots of educational experience for our students. And she perceived that as more responsibility and just piling up the responsibilities. And I felt like she wasn't really contributing to the planning. She wasn't really sharing her perspective. And so that was, and that I was getting a lot of disrespect from her. So that was frustrating for me. But she felt like there was no space for her contribution. So we just didn't quite understand each other. This is how I realized that my critics, or people that don't exactly get along with me, do see me as kind of overbearing and controlling, because this is how she had interpreted my actions. And although I was genuinely acting in what I believe was the best interest of the students, I really didn't consider how my actions were perceived by her, that they were seen as selfish and divisive for our team. So, and due to the disrespectful attitude that I received from her, which was a result of her feeling this way, I didn't really put myself out there to have that conversation to figure out what was really bothering her. I just kind of let it continue and let it build up as this personal conflict between the two of us. So eventually the principal had to get involved because she was hearing from multiple teachers in the school about the conflict, and they were worried about what was going on in between us. And although I had spoken to my principal about the academic struggles and challenges we were facing, I never really spoke to her about how personal it had become. So she the principal just encouraged us to sit down and discuss our issues with her there as a mediator. And so when we were able to put our emotions aside, kind of process those in a separate space, and have the conversation with each other, we both finally realized each other's perspectives. I had to explain to my colleague that if I seemed like competitive or coming across like I was better than her or I knew more than she did, I had to explain to her that I really wasn't competing with her. I was really just competing with myself and my own expectations for myself. And I was just trying to fulfill those high expectations that I had. And that I always really, truly had the students' interests at heart. I was truly doing what I thought was best. And based on some challenges I faced while teaching second grade, I really had to build this persona of confidence. And it was sort of a defense mechanism for me to not let others see how I was struggling. And really that came across as like I was just constantly trying to prove that I was the best, that I was better than her, when really I was just trying to protect myself and my feelings of not always being perfect. So once I realized how she saw it, I really did feel bad, and I was able to reflect on my actions and how they came across to other people. Of course, I'll never change who I am, but I can be more responsive to how it affects the people around me. And I believe that a strong leader recognizes how others perceive them, and they learn how to adapt in ways that works best for everyone. And I recognize how important that is. So now I do ask more questions of my colleagues. I involve them in my ideas, and I listen to their ideas, and I demonstrate clearly. I put intentional effort into demonstrating that I respect their views and that I want to know more about their teaching strategies, and kind of quieting my own expectations of what I think would be best in order to include them and accept their ideas as well, to make it more of a collaborative process. So ultimately, after we processed our emotions through this open communication, we were able to see each other and empathize. And we recognized that our conflict was not rooted in these personal attacks, but just differences in core values and our expression of them. My colleague realized that my actions were only a result of my deep passion about education and what I perceived was best for the students. And I realized that she was just establishing her boundaries as a professional and standing up for her own work-life balance, which I think is completely fair. So for question number 2, when I consider Teach for America's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, the 2 quotes that really stood out to me the most was that realizing educational equity and excellence will take a broad and diverse coalition of people. And we know that the change effort must be shaped by those of us who are most directly impacted by educational inequity. I really want to address the fact that so many school staff and administration do not reflect the diversity of their students, nor are they typically the people most directly impacted by educational inequity. And I think this lack of representatives increases the higher you go on the leadership ladder. So for myself, as a white middle-class teacher in a rural community that I did not grow up on, it is my main goal to build future leaders. I hope to do this by encouraging my students to develop professional goals early, to provide them with hard and soft leadership skills and collaboration skills, and to inspire them to strive for leadership positions in whatever they do. My vision for educational equity is aligned to TFA's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I deeply value intersectional diversity, partnerships across lines of difference, and equal opportunities for positions of leadership. My goal as a school leader would be to recruit local community members with diverse intersectional identities. I would also provide opportunities, education, and training for them to continue to grow into leadership positions at the school. My questions are about how to concretely achieve that. And I saw a program work in Zuni. They had a great program which provided educational and financial resources for assistants to become certified teachers and continue growing in their educational careers. And the impact of this program was clearly apparent by the number of SUNY staff, certified teachers, and staff members in leadership roles throughout the school district. So I would like to work to develop a program like that as an educational leader. And so although our staff at the school I work at now is not so diverse, it really represents that division between staff and students. Our students are very diverse. We have high levels of cultural and linguistic diversity. We have Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Middle Eastern, European American students, from first-generation families to families that have been on this continent for centuries. We have a variety of abilities at our school, with many inclusion students on IEPs, and our school population also represents economic diversity. We have students from wealthier families that come from medical professionals or people that work through the university campus, as we're close to the hospitals and that. And we also have students that live in public housing, that live on the Native American reservations, and just a range of economic classes. So I think this diversity is a blessing for our school. It gives us opportunities to work and collaborate along lines of difference and teach our students how to do that. But this does require explicit and intentional work towards those 4 focus elements of TFA's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I work intentionally in my classroom to address equity and inclusiveness through an intentional progression of lessons and themes. We begin by establishing self-love and knowledge. We explore our cultural identities, what parts of ourselves we identify with the most. And through this process, we also develop respect for others as we share our identities, and we recognize these similarities as well as differences between us and our classmates. There's also team building and class building going on during this time, so we can practice positive communication structures, which I very explicitly teach my students. This promotes understanding of self and self in relation to others. It also prepares students to discuss these issues of social injustice and inequality with a strong foundation of who they are and who their classmates are. So then we focus on social movements and change to inspire activism, and then we work on projects to raise awareness and kind of do something about these issues that we see in our own community. These steps help students understand and interrupt systemic racism, classism, and other forms of oppression, as the TFA commitment states. And all these efforts together over the course of the year help the students work toward equity and building inclusive coalitions among themselves and their classmates. My experience toward equity and inclusiveness in the classroom has prepared me to build this perspective among adults if I were in a school leadership position as well. In combination with a commitment and program to actively recruit a diverse staff with representatives from the community, these same strategies I would implement through professional development to establish an entire school culture with a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. I really look forward to further building experience and knowledge of effective practices through this Rural School Leadership Academy, and I just thank you for considering me for this opportunity. So thank you.